Good morning. Welcome to Silicon Slopes. Today is Wednesday, the March 20th, which I've never given the date before, but I'm going to now. It's March 20th. Today's show is brought to you by Black Desert. Black Desert is committed to one thing above all, fostering an endlessly fun and fascinating resort community without any pretense that puts the remarkable within reach. Home to a PGA FedEx Cup and LPGA event, Black Desert offers world-class golf, hospitality, dining, shopping, and recreating in a stunning 600-acre canvas in the heart of Greater Zion in southern Utah. More info at blackdesertevents.com. Check out Black Desert. It's actually a really incredible development they've got going on down there.
It's going to be a lot of fun for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's very cool. We have an incredible guest, so let's get right to that, Garrett.
Yes, indeed. Jenny Groberg, founder and CEO of Book Smarts Accounting and Bookkeeping. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. A lot of people, if you say accounting and bookkeeping, they'll put their arms out, right?
Yeah.
Or they'll say, we'll worry about that later. But it is a critical part of everything.
Or they think we're super lame and boring, you know?
Yeah. But I can attest, after knowing you for 5 or 6 minutes, that's not the case with you.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, wow.
Appreciate that. That was a huge compliment.
Yeah.
We had a good, fun conversation walking in here. So, but I'd be interested in the story of how you formed the business, why you formed the business, how you grow, and how you kind of roll with the punches of the ups and downs.
Okay, so I started the business in 2008. It was 100% out of necessity. I needed to work. My husband was in med school, and we couldn't even afford to fly him home. He was rotating, and my kids, I had 2 little kids, and they thought he'd left them living with my parents. And I'm like, I have to work. So I found a position in Park City, a restaurant that needed some accounting work. And I had worked as a CFO, a remote CFO for a company in North Salt Lake. So I'm like, yeah, I'll pitch them to be like, hey, just let me do it from home. And they didn't go for it. And so after that, I was just like, I have to do something from home. So I just started consulting with small businesses. And then they would be like, hey, Jen, it's just faster if you do it. And so that's kind of true, right? Like if you can actually focus on your business instead of doing this ancillary stuff, you can make more money. So yeah, I just started consulting with some small businesses, and I landed Slim Olson's in Bountiful, which they have a few gas stations and a lot of property. And at the time, it was just like so great, because then if people are like, oh yeah, we're from the area, we know them, and gave me a little bit of traction. So, and then after a few years, I'm just staying up till 2 a.m. every night doing work. And I just thought, I cannot do this. We're in residency at the time. I'm like, I'm going to sell. I'm out. I can't keep doing this. And then I hired my first employee, and that was kind of a game changer.
Yeah.
And has it been fully remote the whole time?
The whole time, yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
From 2008 on. So kind of at the time, it was a whole new idea, right? But I think the business owners liked it. Like I'd stop in and check on them or help them with things if they needed it or training. But then all the work I could do from home. So.
And for those that aren't familiar with, finance and accounting, you have to do it to make sure your business is viable and continues to operate, grows, but also for taxes, right?
Totally. Yeah, that's the one good thing about taxes is it keeps us in business. People have to do it.
Wait, did you just explain accounting? What did you just do?
Well, I've heard a lot of stories where people neglect this key part of it.
Oh, I see. That was so crazy. Like you have to. Did you tell people like they didn't know that they had to pay taxes?
Well, there's all sorts of fraudulent accounting.
There is a lot of fraudulent accounting.
And it usually comes to light with the tax man, right?
It's true.
How do you deal with like the trust and safety issues?
From the government or from the clients?
Like from a client perspective, like how do they know who to hire, who's real, who isn't, from that perspective?
That's a really good question. So initially, when I'd go on appointments, this was super awkward. But I would pull out my laptop and I'd be like, hey, will you leave me a review before I leave? And it was awkward. And I'm like, I'll go in the other room. A lot of times at the beginning, I'm consulting at their home. One appointment was super late at night. I brought my husband. It was a little sketch. Just a lot of pounding the pavement, right? And one lady was starting a preschool, and it was literally like a drop down desk in her bedroom that we were meeting at, So initially it was just pounding the pavement like that, but I would make them leave me a review before I'd leave. And I had no money at the time, right? Because we're in school. So I bought a laptop on my credit card and did this QuickBooks certification. And so if people were in QuickBooks and didn't know how to do something, on the drop-down menu, it would say, find a local pro advisor. And so this actually really helped me initially. So they would go and type in their area code, and I'd have my photo and like a bio. And a lot of the people on there were guys, like middle-aged men. And my clients were just like, yeah, we don't want to work with a middle-aged guy.
Yeah.
So actually being a woman really helped me. And then I would make sure they left me a review. And I had probably 50 to 100 5-star reviews. So it was awkward, but it paid off. And then anytime anybody else went to try to find a pro advisor, I had tons of reviews. But I think to find somebody that's good, I did an interview earlier this week with Forbes, and Kelly Erb asked me, how do you find someone to do your accounting? We do accounting, we do bookkeeping, we kind of do everything in between. We act as a controller for companies. I think it's really important that you ask people. You can do Google searches, but make sure that you look for reviews. Make sure they actually have a face and a bio. And then I would actually look at their client list and call their clients. I had one guy who was in charge of a family office, a home office, and tons of companies, tons of entities, tons of money. He called me, did a background check, a credit check on me. And I was like, who is this guy? Like, I don't even know if I want to work with him. Like, I feel so naked and exposed with him. And I was like, I don't even know who you are. Like, can I check you? And he's like, sure. So I called some of his staff just to make sure he was who he said he was. But then he asked for my client list. My clients are like, we don't want to give you a good recommendation because we want all of your attention.
Yeah,
on us, right?
that's an interesting challenge.
Yeah. And so I said, okay, yeah, he gave us a good recommendation, but he called each one of my clients. I gave him a list of 10 plus clients. Then he called their tax accountant. He really vetted us hard.
Wow.
Which was awesome. So I don't know that you need to go to that extent, but for him, he was in risk mitigation and management. That was his thing. So, and with everything that was on the line for him, he had to make sure that we were solid. So
it is an industry of high trust, right?
Yeah. And that's why we've been successful. I've had a lot of the same clients my whole career because there have been a few that have said, oh, I think I can do this cheaper in-house. They hire somebody in-house and then they come back and they're like, oh, she left. She had a baby. The other girl we trained, she got married. There's a high turnover, and I have turnover in my company. That's tricky, but we have teams of accountants and data entry and bookkeepers, and they're always trained. They're always cross-trained, and every client has multiple people on their account. So if somebody leaves, it's okay. Like we fill it in and we cover those training costs, but then the client doesn't have to shoulder that.
How do you think AI changes your industry?
Okay, so I wrote an article on that. There was a piece coming out in NASDAQ, and they were asking for recommendations on how AI is going to change things. If you ignore AI and say it's not going to do anything, then you're going to be out of business, right? But I look at AI as getting rid of some of the simple stuff. So like if you have a really simple tax return, it can probably totally do that. But if you have a more complex return, or if you have more complex accounting, like for me, okay, this is a good story. So I had a client who I was doing their quarterly taxes for payroll. And software was coming out that would automate it. So it took me a lot less time. I was like, man, I'm going to make way less money on this because it's all automated now. I told you my husband, finished med school, and I talked to him like, what do I do? And he's like, if I didn't update my surgeries because I made more on these old fashioned things, I'd go out of business. Right. And so I made the move then, and I decided any new technology we'd implement, we would try to stay ahead of the curve. So I put everybody on the software, streamlined everything. It cut way down on my time, but then it opened us to be able to accept way more clients and do way more higher level client work. So I look at AI as the same. it could perhaps replace some of the data entry, simplify, streamline. But most businesses, in my opinion, have so many moving pieces that they need more robust insight and strategy. And that's stuff that we can provide for them. So I'm not worried about it, but I think it will hopefully help our business.
Well, yeah, it probably becomes like a tool, right?
Yeah.
Just like QuickBooks is a tool and all these spreadsheets and all these things that are, that's all technology as well. I assume it just becomes another tool in the toolbox.
Yeah. So like the new Chat GPT 4.0 is 10 times more powerful than 3.5. So I was looking at it like, can it do tax returns, right? Like the percentage of people or the percent of Chat GPT that could pass the bar and the CPA exam, I think it was like 50% or lower. So I don't know what 4.0 looks like for that. But in terms of a tax return, you can tell it, hey, I made this much. I paid this much in my mortgage. I paid this much in interest. But it's still not going to push that information to a tax return. You know, so it can give you a ballpark. It could maybe, you know, tell you what your projected tax liability would be. But it's not going to fill out the tax return and do that. But that's only just one small part of things to get that information. And so as accountants and bookkeepers, we're doing those day-to-day tasks with the business to prepare them for that point.
Yeah. And how big's the team now?
So we're at about 27 women. We have about half in Utah and half all over the country, which is fun. And we're servicing a few hundred clients.
Very cool.
Across the country.
And you mentioned in the early days, like gas stations. What types of clients do you have now? Or are there any that are too big or too small, or do you guys still play?
So I had one client, they go now by beauty industry group, big. But at the time they had like Babe Lash, they had Donna Bella, they had Weston Wayne, they had all these entities. And they were getting bought out by investors. So they hired a new CFO to replace us because the investors wanted an in-house CFO. And the CFO called me and said, hey, you guys are fired. I'm like, okay, no problem. And at the time, they were probably 70% of my business. They were huge. It was a huge hit.
Oh, wow.
Then the CEO calls him and says, what are you doing? You need them. Because now he has even more companies that he's managing and no staff. So I'm thinking, all right, we're going to be losing this company in the next year probably. It took about 10 years for them because the investors, they just kept building their group and their portfolio. Every time they would buy or add to it, they would hire support staff. We would come in and train them and help them get going and support them. Then more employees would get hired. We'd train them and just kind of flex with them. So it was pretty hilarious. It ended up taking 10 years. It was awesome.
What have you learned about entrepreneurship in all of this?
I wish I would have thought bigger when I was starting out. I did an interview with an entrepreneur and they asked me, who did you have as a mentor, early on? Did you have any female mentors? I had none. I had no female mentors in the business world that I just thought, oh yeah, they can do it. I can do it. So I started out 100% just trying to get by, just trying to pay the bills, trying to take care of our kids. Now we have 5. And I wish I would have had somebody be like, yeah, you can go big or go bigger is our motto. We can do a lot more than we think we can. So now we have huge companies. We just got a call from Spilt the other day. They're doing caffeinated milk.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw their billboard driving down here. I'm like, oh, there we go. It's cool. It's fun to see these new things happen. And, we have family offices that are huge. We have also some really small guys. So I love to be able to support businesses in whatever their stages. Image Studios, Jason Olson started at Pressman Auto. And then, they had a house burned down, used some money to start some salons. And he was the one that was like, Jen, I think I can do this cheaper in-house. And then he ended up just being, really taxed trying to manage all these women at all these salons. So he started franchising. Now we've partnered with them that any new franchisee uses us. And, they have 150 franchises
Oh,
now.
wow.
So it's cool. Like
Yeah.
as our clients grow, we grow with them. And it is because we have that level of trust with them.
Very cool. And little bit of breaking news. It is fun to see the rewards of all your efforts. CEO of the year.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. That comes
Congrats.
out tomorrow. It hasn't officially been
Wow!
announced.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's so cool.
That was really cool.
That's
yeah,
very cool.
I was super surprised by that. So Utah Business we have the luncheon tomorrow, so that'll be fun.
That's so cool. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow, that's awesome.
Are there any types of companies?
Was he supposed to say that, by the way?
It's okay.
Okay.
I spoke at the U yesterday at a women's symposium, and Melanie Jones was there, and she said something in the round table. She's like, "Spoiler alert," and I was like, "Okay, if she can say it, it's okay if Garrett says it."
Are there any types of clients that you won't work with because of regulations or weird rules that just don't pencil out?
No, the only clients that we won't work with are business owners that are not nice.
Yeah.
We've had two, I feel like, that I've really kind of had to step in and say, this is not okay. I have to protect my staff. My staff is my greatest asset. If my staff's okay, our clients are going to be okay. And we've had two that I'm just like, no, this is not okay. And the way you're treating them and degrading them, it's not worth it. We can kind of pick and choose. So we want to work with people that are builders and that are nice. So that is I feel like the only reason why we would choose not to work with somebody.
Yeah.
And
Makes
people that
sense.
don't pay their bills. So if people pay their bills and, we want to help them.
Yeah. Are you guys proactive or reactive? Like, do you also give advice if, they're talking through their financials, they're working with you and you're like, oh, that seems a bit risky? Or do you just do what they think is right?
It's kind of up to the business owner. If the business owner asks us, what do you think? Then we will give our advice. It depends on the level of communication. If we see numbers or trends that are not working well, it's our job to point them out. So I did a piece with Forbes on outliers and how if you look at 2 data points, you can't really see a trend. But if you compare 3 data points, you can see a trajectory, you can see an outlier. So the piece was on outliers. So if you compare 3 months at a time in your financials, like your income statement, you can see if something's skewed or off. I always compare 3 years at a time to see how things are looking, right? So if income is all of a sudden really high, then something might be off. Everything else is pretty steady. If you have cost of goods that is super high, I had one client that his cost of goods was high. I'm like, something is wrong with your cost of goods. It's like, no, things are just high. And I'm like, something's wrong here. Well, it turns out that their employee was using their Amazon account to purchase all kinds of stuff for herself. Amazon's kind of tricky to drill down on. You buy a few things at the same time and it will hit your statement as Amazon $300 or something. And you can kind of hide it. You can kind of pad it. And if you drill down in Amazon, it's even hard to see, okay, which credit card hit that? Like if I buy stuff for my business, one transaction might hit my business credit card. If I buy something personal, it hits my personal credit card. So in fact, she was buying all of her Christmas, tons of personal stuff.
Oh, wow.
Probably $60,000 worth of stuff.
Wow.
And the doctors were just like, yeah, it's just products are higher. So it's important that you're paying attention to your financials. It's important that you have a second set of eyes on that to make sure that you are in line. And if something is higher or lower, maybe you missed a rent payment for the month. And if you look at the whole year and say, man, rent is lower this year than last year, that is not right. It's easy to identify things that are not correct.
Yeah. I remember reading maybe last fall at Wall Street Journal that accountants aren't as numerous as they used to be, and there's not very many entering the field. Is that a problem that you're seeing as well?
Yeah. And in fact, when I was studying about AI, a lot of people are like, we're not going to even go into accounting because that's going to be replaced by AI. I think if you're specialized enough, you have a strong skill set, I think that you're going to be fine and you'll have employment. Also, if you can think outside the box and use these tools to benefit your practice and to increase what you can offer, then it sets you apart. So I have heard that fewer people are going into the field. It is a difficult field, but you can still have fun doing it. A lot of people are just like, I'm just at my desk. I love what we do, because we are in the trenches with our clients on a day-to-day basis. So that's fun.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah. So how does it work when you onboard a client? I know there's various systems. We keep saying QuickBooks, but there's a lot of different ones.
There are.
And there might be like a shoebox of greasy napkins or old receipts, everything in between. How do you onboard them, and do you guys systematize things with certain platforms?
Sure. So QuickBooks Online is pretty standard across the board. A lot of clients are resistant. I know I didn't like it. I was used to desktop. But the benefit is that multiple people can be accessing the books at the same time. It's backed up. You're not having to pay the extra, computer fees, cloud fees, storage fees, all that kind of thing. But
by the way, how funny is it that it's called QuickBooks Online still? Like, why not just be QuickBooks? Like, what are they doing? Why do they even have the old system?
That's true.
It's the weirdest thing
I
ever.
mean, I could see it happening because everything was going subscription.
Yeah.
And it's like they would make so much more money going subscription. And that's why they did it, right?
Whenever I log in, I'm like, why does it say QuickBooks Online? Of course, I'm online.
That's true. Just get rid of it. I mean, they've outdated all the software, so you're right. It doesn't even make
Just
sense
call
to
it
call
QuickBooks.
it that. That's funny. I haven't thought of that. But we have other clients that are bigger and need more robust systems. They have more inventory that they're tracking. They're having more employees, more inventory, all these things. And if they don't get out of QuickBooks, they're going to suffer. They're not going to be able to support. They're not going to be able to. They won't be able to support their clients. They won't be able to have their sales close as quickly. They won't know where their inventory is. So it's really important that they're in the right place. So we can kind of help point them in that direction. It's an investment, it's thousands of dollars, but if it's between, making more sales, you kind of have to. So we can help them, get to that point and to switch. But there are a variety of softwares, and whatever the client prefers, we're happy to use that with them. We're trained on all of them. But if there is something that we think is better, we'll definitely direct them towards that.
It seems like QuickBooks Online is the industry standard for small businesses,
Yeah.
even medium-sized businesses, even some large. What would be the system? Like, at what point would you even be able to graduate out of QuickBooks, do you think?
Oh, man, it's been a while since I've been doing the day-to-day accounting, but it's like if you have a certain amount of users,
Yeah.
like I want to say over 20 users that are accessing it. There used to be tiers. If your inventory was over like a certain amount of units, then you would need something more robust. So there's certain thresholds where you for sure have to move.
Yeah. Yeah, what a monopoly QuickBooks has.
Really.
It's incredible.
Of all of your years of experience, do you find that regardless of industries, that companies make certain mistakes with their finances, with their accounting, whether it's like cash flow or supply chain, inventory management, that type of thing?
Okay, I would say the two biggest problems. One is making sure they're paying their liabilities. So I've seen a few clients get into a ton of trouble because they have money coming to their bank account and they think their bank is their register. That is their financials. So they're like, sweet, I've got, this amount of money. Okay, I can pay for that. I can pay for this. And all of a sudden their tax payment hits and they're like, shoot, I'm overdrafting, So I'd recommend you have a separate bank account for your payroll. 100%. You transfer the gross costs of payroll to that. No matter when the payroll taxes hit, some small businesses, it's only quarterly. Some it's every week or biweekly, but keep that separate. We just had a client, we're working with a client who came to us who we can see is having issues with sales tax. So the money comes into her account. She will just spend it. And then we're like, hey, you have a sales tax payment due. She's like, what the heck? This is my money. And she's not realizing that is on top. The sales tax is on top of, her gross revenue. And that's a liability that she has to pay. I had a client lose her building. She got behind on her payroll taxes and was like, whatever. And the wheels of the IRS turn slowly, but they turn. They still turn. It takes a few years to catch up, but they turn. She had to sell her building. She was making payments trying to the state. It was a disaster, but that really brought her down. I had another client who wasn't paying his payroll taxes. He came to me later as a payroll client and said, I want you to help me with payroll. And I was just like, oh no. But then I was like, okay, that's why we're here. We got to help you and we got to keep you in line here. And it's been great, but he got into some trouble because he was ignoring the tax payments and he ended up having to sell his house to kind of get out from under that.
I assume that's actually like pretty common, right? Like you go into business because you want to, own a deli or whatever they're doing, right? And you don't really think about all of that stuff and,
Right.
Taxes and, all these
All
various
these
things.
nuances.
And once they figure it out, I imagine they learn pretty quick that you can't. But the challenge is, like you said, like if you go like 2 years without paying payroll tax, ooh, that's a hefty bill.
You end up paying as much in penalties and interest as what you
Yeah,
initially
that's a
owe.
hefty bill.
So we try to tell our clients, like, no, this is like number one priority. You got to get this taken care of. Just going to tell you really fast. The third problem I've seen that has closed a lot of businesses is having too much debt. Because you don't know what's going to happen in the market. And the businesses that have the most cash, that are the most solvent, they can plow through pretty much any changes in the economy. But that is a big key, is trying to stay out of debt. I mean, we say that, but then things happen, or weird things like COVID or interest rates and things like that. And the more debt you have, the harder it is. Like we had a car dealership in Idaho, and they actually had quite a bit of cash and they had very little debt. And when people stopped buying cars, they were okay. It was no problem. And I saw all these other dealerships closing because they couldn't keep up.
Wow.
Yeah.
A lot of the principles you probably learn in your first year of accounting hold true.
Yeah, that's true.
And if you take anything from this interview, it's the wheels of the IRS do turn.
They do turn. They turn slowly, and people think they're getting away with it.
Yeah, I heard slowly.
But
So
they turn.
You've got a few years of the good life.
Few years, and then it's bad. And you have double what you think you had. So,
Oh, that is crazy. Yeah, I don't even know how you can get away with not paying payroll tax. Don't most of these payroll companies now just automatically take it out, or?
so they should, but if you bounce it, then
Oh,
you're not
I
paying
see.
it. Or like a client just barely, he calls us freaking out because we're like, you have to pay these. And he's like, I'm the only one on payroll. He was such a jerk. And we're like, yeah. And you have payroll taxes because of that. There's your portion, there's the employer's portion, and you're both. And he's like, well, why should I have to pay that? It's like, well, you want the tax deduction of being the employee, and he wasn't willing to pay it. And so, he came to us and his business had been going and he had paid himself, but he hadn't actually made the payments. So he came on, his business came on, we assumed the payroll, but he hadn't made the tax payments with the prior, whoever, I don't know, maybe it was him doing it. I have no idea. And it was really hard for us to try to teach him, you have to pay this. This is number one priority before you spend money on anything else. So.
Do you notice when business owners get into business, or like these entrepreneurs and like this, they really start to hate the government?
Yeah, and it's
Like
just
a little
like
bit
us
more than
personally,
usually.
right? Like at tax time, you're ticked. If you have to pay taxes, you're just ticked that you're paying it.
It's like, I'm literally paying taxes on everything?
Yeah.
This is crazy.
And then you get over it. And if you can streamline it, like the payroll taxes in a separate account, or doing something similar with your sales tax. So you're not really feeling that pinch. It's just like, okay, that's not really my money. I'm setting that aside. Then it's not that big of a deal. So I think it's planning. It's being intentional. It's keeping an eye on things and not getting ahead of yourself. And then you don't feel that pinch.
Yeah.
But it's the people who don't plan and don't have proper help. Yeah, they feel it and they hate their lives.
Yeah.
So.
Ooh.
Yeah. I can view the personas that you're describing of I don't need to pay that, or
Yeah.
that's my money.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a pretty common emotion people feel.
Yeah.
You mentioned your team size, all female, right?
Yeah.
Where do you guys go from here? We've talked a little bit about AI and that accounting's not what once was as far as enrollment in colleges. How do you forecast your next 5 years of moves?
So I am planning on big growth. I mean,
Yeah, it's got to be a huge opportunity that there's not a lot of accountants.
yeah. And
I would
there's not a
imagine.
ton of female accountants, right?
Right.
Like 100% female teams, there's not that many.
And females are far more trustworthy.
Are they?
That,
Yes.
Well,
I
that's
think
good.
that's probably why you were experiencing that in the QuickBooks Online. What did you say it was? Like the little
Pro
expert,
advisor.
the pro advisor thing?
Mhm.
Like, oh, I don't trust like a middle-aged dude like this guy right here.
He
Like,
looks shady.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not, what are we doing here? Like, I think have you found that to be an advantage or disadvantage, or what
I
have you
think
found there?
it's an advantage just being personable,
Yeah.
right? Like, do I know everything? No, but I will go figure it out, right? So initially I would go on consultations and I'd do all the research I could. And I'd say, if there's something I don't know, I will figure it out and I will get back to you for free, right? So I think it's important to just establish that relationship and just let our clients know, hey, we will do everything we can to come through for you. And by just keeping that relationship of trust, and they're our friends and we have a good relationship, then we grow, they grow. It's pretty great. So last year we had about 37% growth in revenue. We had 20% growth in employees, and we had 57% growth in clients. So, from here, we have young moms. We have some people that don't have any kids. We just recently hired 2 CPAs and a data entry that are over the age of 40. A couple of them are 50, and we're hoping to turn the dial because they can work full time. Part-time employees are great, but it's like we need more, and it's hard to be like, hey, no, you really need to work more than 15 hours because they want to be with their kids. And I get that. So, I think from here, my goal is just to provide more employment. I was in a position where I really needed money and I needed to work from home. And I have quite a few people on my staff that really need employment and need to be able to work from home. So our hope is that we keep growing, we keep supporting our clients, but ultimately that we're able to provide employment for women.
Yeah, the model itself is like tailor-made for women who want to stay home with their
Right.
kids and, all of that and still make an income.
Right.
Like that's actually, just that alone is an incredible
It's
good
huge.
for society.
Like hearing from my employees, I had one that I had never met before. She'd worked for me about a year. And we do a retreat every year in this fall, and we go to my family cabin. I fly everybody in, and it's just to relax and hang out. And it's good to get to know each other and kind of have a different level of interaction than just the phone calls and work and stuff. And she said to me, she's just like, my husband needed work. He was working at a bank and hated it. He had finally graduated and was a teacher, and he couldn't get hired. So it was COVID. He couldn't find a job anywhere. And so he's like, do I have to go back and get a master's degree? I do not want to go back to school. She had 4 little kids, and she saw a job, or one of my employees had posted that we were looking for work. It's like, do I do that? Do I not? So she asked him about it, and he's like, well, if not now, when? He was relieved. He was so relieved because he's like, sweet, now I don't have to go to grad school. We can totally bridge the gap in our finances. She can work from home a few hours a day. So she's just like, it was the biggest blessing of our lives. Well, probably not ever, but it was huge.
That's
it made me
awesome.
cry. It was really cool. I'm like, this is why we're doing this.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
that's beautiful.
yeah.
That's so incredible. How do people get in touch with you, Jenny? Like what should we know?
So on Instagram, we're at BooksmartsPro. Our website is booksmartspro.com. I'm Jenny Groberg. So if you Google me or type me in on LinkedIn.
She's the
Yeah.
CEO of the year, ladies and gentlemen.
There will be some new headlines there.
Thanks, guys.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's so cool.
That's so cool. It's so cool because I was telling Garrett earlier, I got a traumatic brain injury 6 years ago, and I was unable to work for about 5 years.
Oh,
And
man.
now, in the last year, I've finally recovered to a point where I can work again. So to have all these things happen, in the last year have been really cool.
Yes. Good for you.
It's just really, if I could say anything to anybody, it would be to just hang in there. just keep plowing forward, and anything is possible. If I can recover from that, anything is possible.
That's beautiful. Jenny, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was incredible. Who do we have tomorrow, Garrett?
We will have Michelle Quist, who is running for Attorney General.
Michelle Quist. Very cool. All right. Everybody check out, and congratulations to Jenny. Everybody make sure you congratulate her tomorrow when it comes out on social media and everything like that. It's a really big deal. We'll see everybody tomorrow.